What up guys, this is Trey with Build Swamp. I'm making this video today in response to a segment that CNBC posted today entitled Elon Musk and Andrew Yang support UBI, is America ready? So the reason that I'm responding to this video isn't because the article is so glaringly dishonest, but because they actually do such a good job of trying to represent that they had a fair argument and they presented both sides when they lied by omission really more times than you can count in the video. So I'm not going to break this down minute by minute, instance by instance going along with it. Instead, I'm highlighting 4 major areas in which they deceive and misrepresent this argument. So they try to present it like Andrew hasn't thought this thing out, particularly that he doesn't know how he's going to pay for it. The first thing that they do is they cite this figure from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, saying that their figure for how much UBI would cost is $3 trillion. So if you go to their website and you look at their article, they say there are 300 million Americans in the United States, and if they each got $10,000 a year, that would cost $3 trillion. That is true. That is true. So they have this figure for $3 trillion, and then immediately they flash up Andrew Yang's figure of $1.8 trillion. So they're trying to frame this as if both are talking about the same plan. They've estimated it costs $3 trillion, and he estimated it costs $1.8 trillion. When if you look at Andrew Yang's freedom dividend, he's talking about giving every American over the age of 18 $1,000 a month, which brings that number from 300 million down to 209. And then also, you can't stack that with other programs like unemployment or SNAP benefits. There would be a welfare overlap, and that number would be less than 209 million. So they immediately try to make Andrew look as if his numbers are off and that this credible organization has already said, no, this is going to cost way more than he's saying it's going to cost. So they flash up this $1.8 trillion figure, and then they say that Andrew accounts for this talking about the welfare overlap, which is untrue. If you go to the Yang website and look at their latest figures, they actually peg this cost at $2.1 trillion. And then within that, they say 600 billion of that will be covered by the welfare overlap. Counting the welfare overlap, Yang's number is actually going from 2.1 down to 1.5, not 3 down to 1.8. So CNBC here is trying to make it seem like Yang thinks that welfare overlap will account for $1.2 trillion. But they flash up that Yang also wants to impose a value-added tax at the rate of 10%. And they say that a value-added tax would generate somewhere between $500 billion and $1 trillion per year in revenue. And this is pretty consistent with the Yang campaign's estimate. They put the value-added tax at $800 billion. But what CNBC fails to do is point out the other things that Yang says will pay for the freedom dividend, like the $50 billion that will come from a financial transaction tax, $100 billion that will come from a carbon fee and dividend, $200 billion that will come from reduced poverty expenses from things like incarceration, emergency room healthcare, and homelessness services. CNBC just chooses not to show this. And the reason for it is they're trying to make it seem like Andrew Yang thinks that this value-added tax is going to equal 1.8 billion. Also, Andrew Yang thinks that welfare overlap is going to fill a $1.2 trillion gap. So they want to start this video off framing that his numbers are way off and he just hasn't thought about it. And then they read this excerpt from Hillary Clinton's book where she says that she thought about running on UBI but couldn't figure out how to pay for it, as if to assume that the proper statesman thought about it and they couldn't figure it out, so I guess it's over, when really this just makes Hillary Clinton look stupid. Which brings me into the next point, which is who they choose to represent each side of this argument. On the people who are supporting it, you have Andrew Yang, you have Elon Musk, you have Mark Zuckerberg, and then you have the mayor of Stockton, but that's kind of inconsequential at the end. They're trying to frame this as if it's a bunch of tech futurists talking about a utopian society coming way down the road, instead of something that's supposed to be happening right now. And then you have the side of the skeptics, in which they put Paul Krugman, incredibly famous Nobel Prize winning economist, Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winning economist, Jeffrey Sachs, Harvard graduate economist. And then they have one that I kind of consider neutral, and Matrish Ghatak. He's a Harvard graduate economist. They have a little clip in there where he says that UBI is positive in developing countries, but they immediately have to follow it up with this.
In comparison, someone from the middle class may already have basic needs taken care of.
So for this person, all the risks of basically the money not being spent perhaps in the most essential items or high impact items, or this causing people to cut back on their work, I would say at least theoretically the concerns would be more.
So the one economist they have talking about it, they couldn't even let him get a good word in. And in doing this, they basically represent the idea as if economists don't like this idea. Instead of talking about Milton Friedman or Hayek or the 1,000 economists that signed an open letter in 1968 saying this would be a great thing for the country. On the side of the supporters, you have Hillary Clinton talking about how this can't be implemented, so you have your proper statesmen on that end for the skeptics. On the side of the supporters, they fail to mention Martin Luther King. They also fail to mention that this passed the House of Representatives 2 times back in 1971 and frame it as if it's a new idea and hasn't been around for decades. In fact, it's been around since the beginning of our country when Thomas Paine championed for it. But they don't make any mention of this on CNBC. Continuing on with the theme of misrepresenting facts, they cite several small studies that raise issues with universal basic income. One of them, they cite a study that happened in Finland in which 2,000 people were given 563 euros per month. The study said that people were generally happier, but CNBC uses it to say that there was no positive effect on unemployment. So there are 2 things about this. One, if you look at the article, it says that people could stack this UBI benefit with unemployment benefits, immediately making it different to Yang's freedom dividend, as opting into the freedom dividend would make you lose unemployment benefits. So with recipients able to be on both UBI and employment at the same time, it's not a fair comparison to $12,000 a year that puts people barely at the poverty line. The second part is that Yang says the freedom dividend will create jobs, but this is because it's being given to every adult in the US that is over 18 and it's happening for their entire life. And it's also not happening in a vacuum. 2,000 people getting $500 a month in the United States would not cause any significant decrease in unemployment. But when every single person is getting $1,000 a month, then you actually start to see businesses hiring more people because commerce in the area is going up. And the second one, which I really honestly can't believe this one, is they cite this study from Ontario, Canada. They say that in Ontario, they were running the study on UBI, but it had to be canceled this year because it got to be too expensive. If you look at the statement from the Ontario government that says why they canceled the program, they say verbatim, "We have a broken social service system. A research project that helps less than 4,000 people is not the answer and provides no hope to the nearly 2 million Ontarians who are trapped in the cycle of poverty." Later on down the article, the research project had an extraordinary cost for Ontario taxpayers, which, according to the Ministry of Finance, would require increasing the HST from 13% to 20% if implemented across the province. So the study was canceled because they thought on such a small scale, this isn't doing anything for anybody. CNBC presents this as if this small program's budget was so run amok that the Ontario government had to cancel it just to rein the costs in. They talk about the immense tax increase, but that's saying only if this was implemented across the entire province. CNBC had to read these and pull these articles in order to, make this video, in order to pull these sources. So they've read these and they know all of this. And to misrepresent something this egregiously, you either have to be acting with malice or you just have to be stupid. I mean, you can't choose another option there. I mean, I guess they could be negligent, which would make sense, but I think we all know what's happening here, that the people at CNBC are purposefully misrepresenting the facts in order to go against UBI. And, CNBC, owned by NBC and MSNBC as well. I mean, MSNBC, it's almost hysterical, the history that they have of excluding Yang from graphics and polling data despite him being higher or equal to any other person on the screen. And this is just one of the latest examples of them coming out and targeting Andrew Yang, but this time they tried to look like they were doing it in a fair way, but with the slightest bit of research going into this, it's so obvious how wrong and inapplicable these arguments are, specifically to Yang's freedom dividend. They cite a bunch of stuff going on in the abstract and then try to pretend like he doesn't know the facts of his specific plan. And this fourth point I can make an entire video on, so I'm really just going to try to hit this one really quickly. The people in this video make references to free money, they make references to money for nothing. The economists say they don't think it's a good idea to give people money for doing nothing. They don't act like Andrew's plan is a response to a direct looming threat from automation and job displacement, and instead treat it like this is some exercise in ideology that we may be able to not, who cares, without addressing the fact that there are millions upon millions of people who are going to be out of work within the next decade, and they're not going to be able to be retrained and brought back into the workforce. Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and thank you.